Welcome back into the National Rundown. This is episode 12, and me and Geono are back again with a super action-packed episode. There is so much to go over this week. I know I've been saying that every week, but this one, it's feeling pretty pivotal, right? There is so much going on in the CFL, but the CEBL is getting down to crunch time. There's so much to go over, and we are going to go through it all. And we're also going to be giving you some of our biggest hot takes near the end of the episode. We're bringing those back because we really want to see some heat going down the stretch. But I'll start things off by checking in with you, Geono. How was your week, and what really excited you going forward this week?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Elks and the Stingers both had two really good home games. Obviously the Vancouver one was not as good as what people probably were expecting, especially in this weird stretch Edmonton's had where they play against some of the best teams, there. But it's been pretty good basketball on TV lately, which I think is probably the better part, right? If the league's healthier in general, you're going to want to tune into some games, and obviously it's been pretty amazing. And I mean, the CFL is about to hit the 1/3 of the way mark through the season, and I don't know where the season has gone already, but we're approaching that number. So I think it's really interesting to check in on things. There's always lots of stuff to talk about, like you said. Feels like every week there's something really going on, but obviously, some weeks are more important than others. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be really interesting. I know we're probably going to have some really good debates going back and forth on each of these topics, but nonetheless, I think we'll kind of start it off like we always do with our national pulse, putting that finger on the pulse, going coast to coast, seeing some of the big storylines before we kind of get in depth on each game. So like I always do, I'm going to start it off with you, of course. Over in the West, what were some of those big things that went on this week?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Calgary Surge, I think, have pretty much stolen the show. Obviously, the Stampede is taking most of the attention, but the Surge really got going at the Stampede, which is funny enough, at the Saddle Dome. They really just came out and they started winning basketball games. And all of a sudden now, they're 4-13. This is not a team that's going to go away quietly. Just when we thought they were out, I remember we were talking, and I remember you and Jeremy were talking, is it already over? We both thought it was. We both, on both shows, we talked about it's over. All of a sudden, it's not so over. There's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. It's really weird, but nevertheless, I'm like, that's probably the biggest thing that's caught my eye. The Mamba are also kind of still hanging around there, and then obviously Winnipeg, they were losing to the Calgary Surge in one of those games too, and then obviously the Bandits and them are still, in a heated battle for first in the West in the CFL. For the CBL, which is, again, I don't know how much movement we're going to really see out of that, but that was pretty interesting for me. In the CFL, there was also some pretty interesting stuff too. The Riders and the Elks are both 4-1. I don't know how many people were going to see that kind of happen, but it is happening. And the impossible has kind of happened where the Elks are now good. Took a long time to get to this point. I've been talking every single time. Every time they keep getting to a better record, I have to keep going back further and further to when I went, what grade I was in the last time this team was at this record. So, it's always great to kind of talk about that stuff. But then also Winnipeg, they are 2-0 since, losing, I was going to say Trevor Harris, Zach Caleros, Taylor Elgersmunt stepping up in that game, and then obviously Dru Brown. I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit because that's a pretty big storyline. Then also Calgary, they played Montreal, and then BC and Edmonton. They're gonna play a big game this week that could really shake up the standings. So lots of stuff going on out here in the West.
Yeah, as for the East, kind of like you just said there with the Surge, they were down and out. Looking at a team in the East, we really kind of thought that was Niagara, right? The back-to-back champions looking for the third in a row. It was looking a little bleak, right? They were 5-10, but all of a sudden this week they've got scorching hot. They are now 8-10, wins against the Badgers, the Shooting Stars, the Alliance. They've got them right back into the picture. And speaking of that picture, the second seed in the East is only one game ahead of the fifth seed. So there's a really big race going to be coming down. And that's probably the biggest storyline going forward there in the CBL. But then as for the CFL, one of the things we were kind of looking at this week was how are the Ticats going to bounce back in that situation with Bo Levi, and it wasn't great. I mean, they hung around in the first half. It was 1-1 after the first quarter, which was really interesting. But again, they were able to not come out on top over the Riders. So that's kind of interesting there. I know we'll kind of break that down later on. But as for the other teams, Montreal got the win over Calgary. That was pretty big for them coming off their bye. There was some things we were kind of highlighting there. And then as for the other teams, the Red Blacks, they lost to the Elks, like you mentioned, and that was kind of sort of everything we had, right? The Argos weren't able to get the win over the Bombers, like you mentioned, but yeah, I think the biggest thing in the East is probably the CEBL right now. Like, that race is really huge, and it's going to be coming down to the stretch, and that's definitely what's caught my eye the most. Yeah. But now we'll kind of break things down, starting with the CFL and all those games there. So we'll pick it up with that Elks bounce-back win, and I'll send it to you first. What did you like there? I know you were probably had your eyes right on that game. You were in attendance, I believe. So how was that?
Yeah, I got to give credit to the Elks for this one. You know, as much as it is an 0-4 Ottawa that they were playing at the time, you cannot understate the fact of where this team has gone from 2025 to 2026. This is a game the team would have lost last year, and I want to make that very clear. That is why this team is now in the contender conversation right now. We are almost a third of the way through the season, like I was talking about. I think it's time we kind of start putting, contenders, pretenders, and, people that we do not think are going to make the playoffs. If you wanted to really come out here and, squash all the, maybe they had a bad, easy record, you got to beat the bad teams as a good championship team. And Edmonton was not really doing that in the first 2 or 3 quarters, and if you looked at the post-game comments from Cody Fajardo and Mark Hillam, they kind of noticed that. They were like, we did not play our best. That third quarter was really where things started to get out of hand. Same thing with the second. And all of a sudden at the fourth quarter, it's like 23-17. And this game looks wide open. They hung around a lot longer than they probably should have, Ottawa. But man, did the Elks come out and that's the execution you want to see from a championship football team. They go out, they blow them out 40-something to 17. Really can't ask for much more. I got to give credit to the Elks. This is a game that you finish. It's a championship team to say, no, it's a team that you're going to beat every single time that you go out there. So credit to them, because this year, like I said, this is a different team. This is a different Elks team. If it was last year, I don't know if they closed this game out, and that's really been the difference between 2025 and 2026.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there, right? It was 16-14 Elks going into fourth quarter, and the Red Blacks were kind of hanging around. Although Mayer wasn't great at the start, he had that pretty poor pick, which I'll kind of highlight there. I really was not impressed by that at all. I think it was one he definitely could have avoided. But, give him a tiny bit of credit. He came out and had that really nice touchdown pass to Eberhardt. So, yeah, he wasn't great, although he showed a little signs of promise. But for me, again, it was one of those games where he kind of got away from the game plan that they had been going out with the last few weeks, where it was like, we're keeping things simple, we're just doing things so that we're not putting you in trouble. And I think maybe after a few weeks, he's getting a little more confident, and that kind of showed a little bit. And he was maybe too confident, had some poor throws, and it resulted in the loss. But yeah, obviously they were trying to, kind of contain Rankin, and I'll kind of get your thoughts on that. But, was it eventually they just couldn't hold the beast any longer, right? And he just broke out for his big rushing. He had some nice catches too. So, yeah, 3 total touchdowns for him, if I'm not correct. But, yeah, what was his kind of impact on this game down the stretch?
You hit the nail on the head. You just can't contain this guy. You can try your very best, and they did at a certain point. Rankin, I believe, got the first touchdown of the game, if I remember correctly. A little bit slower in the second and third quarter, but man, that fourth just blew it wide open. He got a rushing touchdown, I believe, like halfway through the quarter, then finishes it off with like 3 minutes to go. Just Ottawa really looked like they hung around, and you could see, maybe if they get 1 or 2 things to go their way, they can make it happen. I just think the Elks, honestly, they just didn't play their best in the middle quarters, but that last game, really, you could see why Justin Rankin is the heart of the offense. You can see why he's the heart of this Elks team. Is he the part of what makes Edmonton one-dimensional? I don't know. Probably there probably is a good conversation about that. I know the BC Lions probably would agree with that. But just, keeping it on topic here, I think Justin Rankin is just 100% where this team rides or dies. If he does not have a good night, they're not going to play well. They tried to get him the ball early, and I think it worked for the most part. It's probably why he was able to have a good night. I think, they wanted to avoid a repeat of what happened in Kelowna, because you can't have that happen where, he ends up with like 40-some yards and, you go out to lose by like 12 points to the BC Lions. So that's something I'm also going to be keeping tabs on this week.
Yeah.
Because you want to see how the Elks are going to be able to respond against a team that really was the only team that's absolutely crushed them, right? You looked where you could say Montreal, they kept pace, and obviously the one loss, like, it's a blemish, but if you want to go out and be a contender, you're going to have to beat the team that right now I believe is 4-1. You got to do it if you're the Elks. You got to prove that you can be, you got to beat everybody. So I think that there's going to be something to be said there, and I'm interested to see Rankin's role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that'll be very interesting. I think that's probably going to be what I'm keeping my eyes on the most this week is how will the Elks respond, and more importantly, how will they kind of free up Rankin and kind of do the exact opposite of what happened 2 weeks ago. So
yeah.
No, that'll be interesting. I think we kind of can wrap this game up. I think, the Elks are back on track, and unfortunately the Red Blacks just nothing to like there again. And for me, I saw on the sideline Dinwiddie looked absolutely pissed, and rightfully so. Your team's 0-5. There's not much to like, but hopefully they can get their win. I mean, I just want to see them get a win eventually, right? Like you shouldn't be going winless in this league. Eventually you got to get one through, even if it's just a fluke. But moving forward to, a team that they probably regret trading one of their guys in Dru Brown, who had an amazing game for Winnipeg this week in their win over the Argos. Yeah, like I said, Dru Brown was fantastic. That was the big storyline. Coming in for Collaros after his injury last week. Elgersma stepped in, was able to manage the game last week and get them the win. But this week, they've suited Dru up, and he was able to fit right back in the system that he knows. So it was amazing for him to go out there, do his thing. But I'll kind of get your thoughts on him to start this game off. How great was Dru Brown in this game?
Yeah, I think if you're the Ottawa Red Blacks, you're probably kicking yourself at this point, right? Because now, you're 0-5. You probably would love to have Dru Brown here, and I think he proved that. He looked like the knight in shining armor, man. I don't know any other way to put it. He was on pace for almost 400 yards. I remember texting you that in the beginning of the fourth quarter. I'm like, is this guy going to steal Collaros' job? I don't know. I think it's a conversation, but none. It is a conversation. I'm very happy to talk about that. But, I think, okay, he did really, really well. Like, being able to throw up over 300 passing yards, really in a brand new offense for him. I know he was there before he went to Ottawa, but he was the backup. Like, he didn't get these reps. He played a little bit, but you started to get the sense of, okay, this guy, it'd been a while since he got back to Ottawa, like, since he was in Ottawa. So to just see how seamless it looked, you really could not have expected it to be any better. If you're like, okay, what's the ceiling of this thing? I think he pretty much found it. I'm interested to see, just where Mike O'Shea kind of fits him in now, how he manages the Elgersma, Dru Brown thing. It's going to be a smaller dynamic of this whole situation, but honestly, I think the bigger takeaway here is I think they're in good hands, to be honest with you. I think they're in good hands while Collaros is away. I don't think they need to rush him back at any point. We'll see how that goes in week 2, of Dru Brown starting, but I think it's really just a good overall trade for them. I really credit the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for being able to find a good replacement right off the bat, because looking ahead to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, you'll see that it's not easy to do that. So credit to Winnipeg.
Yeah, I think, like you just said there, the trade was amazing. And even if you didn't expect Collaros to get an injury, that he's getting up there in age. There's always a likelihood of that happening. And thankfully enough, they had Dru Brown there to step in, because it's going to happen. And I think Hamilton probably should have been more conscious of that going into the season as well. Kind of the same deal with Bo Levi, right? Was Trey Ford the guy that you really wanted? Was even this Jake Dolegala that you bring in, was that exactly what you want? Probably not. So there could have been a chance for you to pick up somebody else, make a trade, but fortunately you didn't. And Winnipeg, even though they gave up that first-round pick, it's looking like a perfect trade for them. Yeah. But exactly like you said there, I think keeping Collaros, there's no chance to rush him back. I think it showed there. Like, you have Dru Brown, a guy who knows your system. He can handle it. Even if you want to bring Collaros back, like, eventually you're going to do that because he has the experience to go out there and give you this good playoff push. But for a couple of weeks, Dru Brown can absolutely do his thing. And now you're kind of looking at Taylor Elgersma, and it's like, what kind of goes on there, right? Is he just going to keep, watching from the sidelines this year, getting, collecting info? I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, but if you're looking at your future, I don't know, where does Taylor Elgersma fit? Do you want to give him a chance somewhere else? That's probably another conversation for another day, deeper down the line, but just something to kind of note for now.
I think it's the Rough Riders, but we'll move on from that. Yeah, because that's my nugget. I'll come back to that when we see a little bit more. I think it's the Rough Riders, but nonetheless, good a little wrap on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Yeah, but now to kind of look on the flip side, I do want to take a moment and talk about the Argonauts, because this game, although they did lose, I think they definitely could have went the other way and they could have won. For me, there was a pivotal point in this game where Toronto missed the field goal. Winnipeg then took it back all the way for a touchdown. And for me, if you would have made that field goal, you are right there in that game. Now you gave up the touchdown. It's back to 2 scores. It really wasn't great. And to kind of look at this from a Bombers perspective, the guy who returned it was Vival, and he was the one who muffed a punt earlier in the game. So for him, he was devastated after that muffed punt. And for him to get back up, return this was amazing for him. I'll just note that. But even then, the Argos, they muffed their own missed field goal that they could have taken out. It resulted in a rouge for the Bombers. But yeah, for me, I felt like the special teams almost lost them this game. And really, if they didn't make those crucial mistakes, and it's really simple things like tackling a guy after the missed field goal, you got to do that, right? Like, it's not something you expect to do. So really, I think if they gave Chad Kelly enough chances to, go down the line and get a touchdown, I think it definitely could have propelled them back into this game. But
I agree.
That's another hypothetical. It could have went the other. You really don't know, but I think definitely the Argos should have been really in this game closer to the end for sure.
100%.
But I think, Argos now, looking forward, I believe they play the Ticats this week, so it'll be a chance for them to hopefully get back. And we'll see. It'll be an interesting game for both teams if Ticats can somehow scrape out a win, see how the quarterback situation is looking. But we'll move forward to another East team now, looking at the Alouettes, who are taking on the Stamps. And this was a very interesting game because the Alouettes were coming off that bye. I was, for example, keeping a close eye on their defense. I know I've said that for a few weeks now, that is kind of where they're lacking. And I really broke this down a lot more on North of the End Zone this week. But for me, their defense, although they gave up 30 points in this game, I felt that they were a lot better than, probably what the scoreline shows. They were facing Vernon Adams, who's coming off that historic performance, and they really kept him in a relative check, right? They got 3 sacks on him. They recovered a fumble off him, and he only had 272 yards and 3 touchdowns. Compared to last week, that is definitely a bigger difference for sure. So they were able to get this win, and they kind of let them hang around more than they should have. I think Montreal could have probably pulled away even more, but yeah, for me, I felt like their defense was solid. But again, it's something I noted on North of the End Zone that they haven't given up less than 30 points in a game since the first week of the season, and that was still 27 points. So they've been giving up so many points per game. It's something they're going to need to clean up going forward, but I think they're taking a step in the right direction, and that's something that I also noted was they're slowly taking steps to getting to a more championship caliber team. But I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I think that really hits the nail on the head. Again, when I was talking in after the recap too, I remember that. I remember looking back. I'm like, yeah, going into this bye week, I was a little bit hesitant to be where do I stand on the Montreal defense. You basically touched on it right there. Like, they limit Calgary to just 30, which is a benefit from, what Toronto gave up with 58. And I noted that because it's important, right? Limiting a team that just came off 58. I think context is good. But, for it to be a 5-point drop from what they gave up against Ottawa, the bigger picture matters in that situation. I'm concerned about the Montreal defense, and I think from now on it's fair to put that out there. It's a third of the way through the season. If the trend is still going on this long, it's more than just a trend. It's kind of becoming a characteristic that they need to, fix. And right now, I think that's probably their biggest concern because there's not many else out there for the Montreal Alouettes. But looking at the bigger picture, yeah, you're right. Like, going into a bye week, I was expecting things to kind of get solved, right? They had a long time to look at Calgary, long time to study that game too. And at the end of the day, not all these teams that they played are, going to go off and win the Grey Cup. Like, Ottawa is not having a great season, obviously. And for them to give up 35 points, I was concerned by that. But the bye offered a little bit of some hope. I think I'm interested to see how they readapt for this one. If they come out and they can maybe hold Calgary to the mid-20s, I would be a heck of a lot more optimistic about this team than I probably would without it, because right now that's their Achilles heel. But honestly, big week this week. That's what I'm more looking at. If they can drop their defensive points allowed to 20 to 25 points, I think it's a better start to where they need to be.
Yeah, one of the biggest things for me in this game as well, I don't know if you saw it, but they were, on the offensive side of the ball, they were stunning. And it almost got to the point, me and Owen noted this on North of the End Zone, that they were almost getting like a little too cocky out there. Like they were throwing flea flickers, they were doing some lateral, the one Sneed pass where it was a lateral touchdown, throw to Sneed, and then he made this athletic throw into the end zone. That was amazing. But again, few Philpott jet sweeps as well. Like they were just having fun out there, right? They were having some fun, and that was part of the reason I think they didn't quite pull away. I think they kind of just hung around, let Calgary hang around in this game. Could have put it away maybe a few times, but again, the defense is obviously the biggest note, like you said. So going forward, that's just what I want to keep an eye on. Keep keeping an eye on for sure. But then again, we'll move on to our final game of the week, right? Actually, before we do that, I'll mention that Montreal and the Stamps play again this week. So that'll be interesting, right?
Very big one.
Get back. If Montreal can get 2 in a row against the Stamps, that's also a pretty big statement, I feel.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, Rough Riders taking on the Ticats in this game, the last game of the week. The Riders pulled away in the second half. The biggest thing was Ticats did not score in the second half, and the Riders scored, I believe, 24 points. So for me, Ticats hung around for a bit, but it wasn't great in the second half. It was 1-1 after the first quarter, which is just something just kind of hilarious to me, especially if you're not a CFL fan. You're looking at that and, we got a 1-1 football game in the first quarter.
Yeah.
A little something, but yeah, honestly, there wasn't too much I have to say in this game. Again, I don't think Trevor Harris was necessarily playing his best again, and I know he said last week that it wasn't his best game, and I wouldn't necessarily say this was a great bounce back either. One thing I will say, though, was, he did get his receivers kind of more involved as a committee rather than just one, right? Schaefer Baker, 78. Emilus, 72. Keyshawn Johnson, 41. Like, that was more of a spread around kind of deal rather than just Keyshawn Johnson with like 110 yards. But, again, looking at it, they got the win. You can't be too upset there. And they won 38-7, so I'm not really going to harp on Harris too much. He managed the game, and that's all they needed him to do, right? So I'll get your thoughts on this game for sure.
Yeah, I think AJ Aleb coming back was really the big part here. They missed him so much. You can just tell the difference in the offense, right, when he's in the lineup versus not in the lineup, and I think they did a really good job of holding out until he could come back. Now they look like the best offense in the league again, and I know that might be a hot take, but it is true. I think that's probably a good really way to sum it up, right? The Heat obviously played a factor in this game. I'll say this, I'm not the biggest Jake Dolegala believer. I remember watching him when Trevor Harris went down in his first season with the Riders, and they had like Shea Patterson and Jake Dolegala go back and forth, and man, those were tough times if you were a Riders fan watching those, I can only imagine. But, Jake Dolegala just does not inspire me a whole lot about a guy that can lead a CFL offense. He's never really shown it. He's never really gotten the opportunity. In my opinion, he's just good at being tall, and I think he's more of a short yardage QB. In my opinion, it might be a hot take, but at the end of the day, I think that's what it is. Hamilton needs to figure out their quarterback situation. You can't go out there and lose more ground in this spot. Otherwise, you're going to be in an Ottawa situation, and nobody wants to be in an Ottawa situation. So, for me, I will say this: immediately, Trey Ford excited me. Right, I've spent a lot of time in Edmonton, obviously, watching him. He gave me that flash about this, and it's funny because the last time that I really remember Trey Ford establishing that, like, I'm the guy, was in Edmonton when they were playing against Saskatchewan, funny enough, and it was just a random week, like, 7 game. We were like 0-6, and I remember Trey Ford just lit him up. He was running around in the backfield. If you remember that game, if you were a Riders or an Elks fan, I almost guarantee you do. I just don't have the date off the top of my head, but that was what this felt like. You could tell immediately, it's like, this is a guy who can be a difference maker. He can be an X factor. I think honestly, Hamilton would be really stupid to not give Trey Ford more of a look next week, to be honest with you. I think they got to look into that because his feet is his weapon, and he's shown that. The arm is probably the part where people get a little bit more, concerned, and I think that's fair. But right now, Ottawa just needs, Hamilton just needs somebody to do something, to kickstart the offense, to not have it end immediately. And, there was times where it's like, Kenny Lawler puts the football into the wrong hand when he's going upfield. Like, is that Jake Dolegala's fault? No. But at the end of the day, Bo Levi was showing that you just need to get the ball into the hands of your receivers. Things are going to happen, right? Like, that's what's good with Kenny Lawler. That's what's good with most of the people there, right?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for this Hamilton offense is, you're having a guy like Bo Levi Mitchell versus Trey Ford, when those are two completely different quarterbacks in the way that they play the game. So switching your entire offensive scheme from one to the next within a week is almost impossible. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but they need to switch that in their heads where it's like, Trey Ford, like you just said, it has the capability to be the guy, but we just got to switch up our offense now, and that's going to be tough. But if Trey Ford can figure out the arm a little bit, that'll help for sure. But yeah, just switching up the offense, it's going to take some time, I feel. But yeah, I think Trey Ford should definitely have an opportunity, right? You just got to switch that up. That's a big thing.
I agree.
Yeah, I think we're about, like you mentioned on the top of the show, we're about a third of the way through this CFL season. So we're kind of going to do a little fun segment here of our surprise and shock so far. I'm going to start things off. Surprise is going to be kind of something good that's been going on, and then the shock is something that's, really outlandish and hasn't really been good for this team. But in particular, my surprise is honestly how well the Bombers have responded to the adversity this season, right? Going back to last week when the Claras went down with his injury, how well, that turned out for them with Elgersma going in there, getting the win, and then Dru Brown getting the win this week. You now have 3 quarterbacks that have helped you get wins this season, and that is probably not something a lot of football teams can say that they have ever done. Going back to the NFL, CFL, whatever, like, it's not often in a season you have 3 different quarterbacks that go out and get you a win. So, and to be said, I not necessarily Elgersma went out there and really forced that win, but still, I mean, he was there and he helped them do so. So for me, the Bombers have really handled this well, and if they can keep staying afloat these next few weeks, I feel like they're going to have a chance to definitely make the playoffs, even if it's through that crossover or whatnot. But yeah, they're going to have an absolute chance to do so. And if Dru Brown can just keep doing his thing, this trade looks like just chef's kiss. Like, this is just beautiful. So, I mean, that's honestly all I have to say there. It's just something I wanted to note. I know we talked about it already this episode, but it's just been a tremendous trade so far. And to give up a first-round pick, for me, I was like, hey, that might be a little bit much just for backup, but,
it's important.
They had it all wrong, right? They had a plan. Yeah. So, yeah, that's going to be there for me. I'll send it to you for your surprise, and then we'll get into the shocks a little bit after that.
Yeah, mine's got to be the Elks start. To be honest with you, 4-1. I don't know how many people really expected the Elks to be 4-1 after week 6. Like, that is just insane. Could be 4-2 or 5-1 going into week 7 here against the Lions, but that's got to be my biggest one. Cody Fajardo is looking like the quarterback that Edmonton has dreamed of since probably Trevor Harris at the very end of the late 2010s. Been everything they've wanted for and more. Justin Rankin is again the perfect running back they've probably wanted. Honestly, he's probably the best CFL running back we've seen probably in the last 10 years. Brady Oliveira aside, and Andrew Harris, that'd probably be my guy. But just statistically, this guy just puts it up. We mentioned the Corey Sheets stat, like that's just insane. But in terms of the Elks, he's also probably one of the best they've seen in probably the last 10 years. I can say almost guaranteed. So that's kind of my big start. Is just I can't believe how good this team is doing, especially coming into it. My hot take was that they were going to make the playoffs as a 3 seed. They're the 1st seed. They're tied for the 1st seed after week 6. So I think that's always great stuff. Just really interesting run that kind of materialized.
Yeah, for me, I think, honestly, like, looking at this week is going to be huge in the kind of direction of where they're going to be going, right? If you win this game, you're 5-1, you've now beat the Lions, and your confidence is probably back. I know you just lost to them, so you're probably feeling a little bit shaky going into this game. Who knows? But if you lose, you're then 4-2. BC's now closing that gap. It's a lot smaller, whereas if you go 5-1, you're really competing for that top seed probably for the next few weeks unless something crazy happens. But yeah, I think they've had a tremendous start. So there's that to be said. And now looking forward, you're going to want to capitalize even more. And that's maybe being a little bit greedy, but yeah, they have a chance to do something very special for sure.
Yeah. And they also play the Riders too after this week. They play them back to back, and then if they're both tied for first still, that'll be just absolutely like tremendous football to watch in the middle of August, or sorry, beginning of August. I think it's it's at the end of July, beginning of August. That's my bad.
Yeah, this will be a really interesting stretch for sure. But now looking at our shocks and a team we just kind of talked about, my shock is the BC Lions start. I know they've had some tough games, but for me, they were this close to the Grey Cup last year, and now they are. Is it 1-4 or is it 1-3? I think it's 1-4.
I think it's 1-4. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're now 1-4, and it's definitely not what I was expecting. I was definitely expecting an over 500 start up to this point at the very least. So I know there's a lot to like, especially coming off that win. Now we're going from the bye into a team we just beat. So there's a lot to like there for me. But so far this start, it wasn't great, and I think the defense was a big part of that. So hopefully we can figure that out. We know this offense can do their thing, but it takes more than just an offense, and we've seen that through the CFL already this year. So for me, BC Lions start wasn't great, and that's what's really shocked me.
I like that.
Yeah, but as for you, what would you say is your biggest shock?
That Jake Maier is still the quarterback of the Ottawa Redblacks. I'll just come out and say it. I can't see why this is still the situation. After week 6, and you're still running with the QB that we all thought was going to be an experiment, right? Like I was under the impression, hey, like try your guy out, try the guy that you want to go out with. I don't see what's there. To be honest with you, I've watched pretty much all their games live, right? I've had to do a few, highlight games, but man, like I just don't see it. I don't see the vision where you think this guy is going to lead you to a playoff appearance or just anything. Like it's getting to a point of the season where it's no longer an experiment. Like, after this week, we are third of the way through the year, and I mean, when are you going to go to McLeod Bethel Thompson? I don't know. I really wonder if if sticking with Jake Maier was worth losing Dru Brown. I think that's the question that everybody's going to be kicking themselves about, right? Like, how do you feel about that? Like, if you're Ottawa, you kind of got to look at this as maybe this is really bad asset management. Yeah, you get a first-round pick, but I think Ottawa wanted to contend this year. They probably saw themselves as being able to, be in that third seat and maybe fend off the crossover, but that's not even possible anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's not a lot to like with Jake Maier. Like I keep trying to find something, but unfortunately, it's just I don't think he can be the starting caliber quarterback in this league. Unfortunately,
I agree.
As harsh as that might be to say, but I think trading Dru Brown was not the play. And that first round pick, it's cool and all, like you just said, but where is that necessarily going to get you per se? Like, you need to have a quarterback is probably the most important position in this league, and you've just traded the only other real option you had because you're not going to look at McLeod Bethel Thompson and be like, hey, this is also another guy that has a chance to be our starter going forward. No, it's not really the case either. So I don't know, really don't know, but I definitely agree with you that this is definitely the biggest shock. Like I figured maybe they'd let him go like to week 3 max, and now we're like at week 7. So yeah, it's not great for sure. Not great at all. That is all for our free version of the National Rundown. If you enjoyed that, go subscribe to our Insiders portion. For only $2.99 a month, you can get our debates, news, headlines, and more. So make sure you go do that ASAP, and we will see you in the next one.